Good morning. Oh, it works. That's awesome. How's everyone doing this morning? Yes? Good night last night? Good food somewhere? Drove in this morning? One of the two, all the above? Yes? Awesome. It's so good to see everyone here. I want to welcome you to Childhood Brain Tumors in the Modern Era, a conference for parents and survivors. And this is Robin Betcher. She's the CEO of the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation. My name is Mark Edmiston. I'm with the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation, and together we are so happy to have you here for this joint conference. First off, I would like to really introduce kind of our bosses, which is always important to do. We'd like to introduce our board of directors, the board of director members that are here. So we have Chris Hoffman, chairman of the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation. Chris is here, yes. We've got Robert Bob Budlow, from chairman of the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. Bob? Where? He's here somewhere. We have Lionel Leventhal, board member for the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. Lionel, thanks for being here today. And we've got Dr. Anita Nierenberg with the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation as well. Anita's up here at the front. We're so excited to have you here today. Thank you so much for giving up your weekend to come and spend time with us. I have to say I've already learned a lot, and the conference hasn't started yet. I had a chance to go to dinner last night. I was surrounded by this perfect mix of one of the social workers that are speaking here, a mom of a survivor, and a 14-year survivor of a brain tumor who's a young adult now. Her name is Jay. And I had the chance last night as we were sitting there as the mom and Jay, Gracie and Jay took me through their diagnosis, from the time of diagnosis, and then now that Jay's a young adult, really looking at what they face on their journey and what they faced on their journey. Many times it seems like they've had to figure things out on their own, and many times they were able to find the support of others as they went through this journey. And it was so funny, Grace, not funny, but Grace mentioned to me, she said, Mark, she said, going into a conference like this, I feel it's safe. I feel like Jay can walk into this conference and walk into a room knowing that there are people and others who've experienced the same thing that she's experienced, and it feels more of a safe environment for me. And Grace, that meant so much to me when you said that last night. And what it really hit me is, as much as this conference is about getting information and providing information to you, our families and survivors, I look forward, and Robin and I both look forward to getting information from you so that our organizations can both individually and collectively put in the programs, services, and information that you need and try to get ahead of some of this experience instead of trying to catch up with what you've been through. So our commitment is to do that together. So, Robin?
Good morning. I'd like to say that it's been a pleasure working with Mark and his staff and the volunteer leaders of the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. It's been almost a year that we started planning this conference for you. We think it's important that we work together, that we collaborate, and we think that the time is now, because we need to be a much bigger voice, and we can be bigger and stronger for children with brain tumors and their families if we work together, because we believe that the kids can't wait. So thank you for coming today, and enjoy the conference. And now I have the pleasure of introducing a woman that I met 2 years ago when I was new to the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation. She came to one of our volunteer conferences to speak, and she is the keynote speaker for us today. Michelle Keys was invited 2 years ago to give put the face of the mission, the story of the mission, and she brought her son Andrew to Asheville, North Carolina. And boy, did she give us the motivation. Through tears and laughter, she told her family's story. Michelle is not only the mom of Andrew, who is now 8, and Andrew was 17 months old when he was diagnosed with an atypical rhabdoid tumor, ATRT. But she's also the mom of 4-year-old twins, so I can't imagine how busy their household is in Michigan. And on top of that, actually, Michelle professionally is a clinical psychologist. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Michigan. And she's a principal faculty member with military support programs and networks. So she works with programs designed to help military families. So please welcome Michelle Keys.
Good morning. First off, I have to say thank you very much to Mark and to your staff, particularly Stacia, who I've worked with, as well as to Robin and your staff, Shelley in particular, who I've had the honor to work with. I think this kind of conference is really unique for a lot of reasons, right? One, you have two organizations who are actually coming together to leverage their expertise. And in the rest of the world, that doesn't often happen because everybody likes to play in their own sandbox. And so I think that in and of itself is something to be commended from leadership on down to the folks who are working out with all of our families. Before I get started today, I want to kind of get an idea of who's in the room. So who traveled locally this morning? So who's from this general geographic area? Okay, so a lot of folks local. I'm imagining CHOP as part of your worldview for some. How about others? Where did you travel from for this event? Where did you travel from? Just yell it out. The Bronx. There we go. I've been there. How about Staten Island? Okay. Virginia. New York. Montana? Really? Oh, Alex. Okay. We've got a jokester in the crowd. South Jersey. Long Island. Indiana. Very good. New Jersey. Others. So it's lovely whenever you can take a conference and you can give it a voice in a community and bring people together. I also want to kind of get an idea of, for folks in the room, where are you at on your journey? Because one of the things we have in common is we're all on a journey, but we might be in different places. Who are folks who are still in treatment, who are still in the throes of it? So we have some folks who are still very much in the throes of it. And I commend you for coming to something like this because first and foremost, that means that we have hope. And we always have hope. No matter what the diagnosis is, no matter what the subtype is, we always have hope. How about other folks who are just coming off of treatment, haven't been off very long? That was a really scary time for us, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that because that transition into not being on treatment feels really weird at first and really scary, like you don't have a net. How about for other folks who've been out 1, 2 years? Okay, 3 years, 4 years, 7, more than that? 25. 20. We can really just acknowledge. I have to say that when I was asked to give this talk, I asked my husband first because he's got to take care of the brood back home. So he has to say yes to just about everything I do. And he's like, yeah, go. And then I had to ask Andrew because this is his story almost more than it is mine. And he said, sure, that's fine. How long will you be gone? Do I get to go? Because last time we went to Asheville and we took a little side trip over to Pigeon Forge. And if anybody's ever heard of Pigeon Forge, it's the go-kart capital of the country. And so for a 6-year-old boy, it is Mecca. And so he said, well, can I go? And there's no go-karts in Philadelphia. No, you don't want to come. And so then I just said yes. But I didn't really think about what I was going to talk about. And as the time got closer and they were asking me for slides, I thought, oh my God, what am I going to say? What have I done? What have I gotten myself into? Because to be honest, this is very humbling because I am you. And what in the world could I possibly share that you don't already know? What could I possibly share that you haven't already lived and probably lived better than I have? And so it's a very humbling experience for me to stand up here and talk with you. And the only thing that I have to give is our story and what we've come through and the lessons that we've learned from that. And that's not to say that these are the same lessons that you should learn because we all learn our lessons differently and at different places. But this is what we've done and this is what's been helpful for you and perhaps for us, and perhaps it might be helpful for you as well. This is my Toby. So this is my heart and soul. My husband, we met in 2001, got married in 2004, got pregnant in 2005, really pregnant in 2005. I'm thinking of you a lot. It gets better. And then we had this beautiful little person, Andrew. Not so little. He was 9 pounds, 14 ounces. But he was little to me. And I have to tell you, I'm one of those cheesy moms who literally the moment he was born, I could look at him and see my soul in his eyes. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that a part of me lived in him. We had an idyllic first year and a half. He is character. All my boys are character. We had a normal first year and a half. Everything went just like it's supposed to be. We were confused and lost and sleep deprived and all those great things. And yet everything was unfolding exactly the way it was supposed to be until it didn't. In July of 2007, Andrew got the stomach flu. 12 hours later, I got the stomach flu. 6 hours later, Toby got the stomach flu. I will not share the details, but I promise you it was the stomach flu. There's no doubt it was the stomach flu. Within 24 hours, I was better and Toby was better, but Andrew wasn't. He continued to vomit, and he continued to vomit every day for about a month, and at random times. So we did what every good first parent does. I mean, literally, the day he got sick, I took him to the pediatrician. As a second and third time parent, I never do that. But as a first time parent, I totally did. I took him, oh, he puked, help. Yeah, it's the stomach flu, go home. So we kept going back because he kept puking, and because he was in daycare, they had a rule, like, you can't come if you've puked. So, okay, fine, we kept going to the pediatrician, kept going to the pediatrician. She kept saying, yep, his pH balance is just off, let's try this medicine. Oh, his pH balance is still off, let's try this medicine. So we went through every stomach med you can imagine for a 17-month-old. At a certain point, it was like, you know what, this is a little ridiculous. Something else is going on. So we took him to the emergency room at a top-tier medical institution. I love my medical institution. I'm employed by them. University of Michigan. Yep, nope, he's got a stomach virus. Keep doing what your pediatrician says. So we kept doing what our pediatrician said. We went back again. And then we said, you know what, okay, so our kid pukes. We're just going to like live because he pukes and we're just going to deal with it. We went on vacation. We went to San Francisco for a week, which is San Francisco for a week with a puking baby was quite an interesting experience. But we just carried plastic bags with us everywhere, and we carried wipes and we carried clothes, and you kind of adjust because you don't know any different. If the doctors tell you this is what's happening, you have to say, okay, you know better than I. How else could I possibly know anything? But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I knew something wasn't right. Kids don't just puke, and they don't just keep puking. Our pivotal moment came at Kroger, of all the places. So those of you in the Midwest, Kroger's a grocery store. And Andrew and I are at the grocery store. He's in the little grocery basket in the front seat, you know, and I turned an aisle, and he let out a blood-curdling scream like nothing I've ever heard of in my life. His arms went up, and he lost his entire center of balance in the grocery cart. And I stopped right there, and every alarm inside my body went off. This is not right. Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong. And I went home that night, and I looked through, as you can tell, I love pictures. I looked through every picture I'd ever taken of him in the last several months. And I saw through the pictures what my eyes hadn't seen, and that is that things were changing for him. There's this developmental progression that happens with young children that they go up on a curve, they don't go down, and they don't stay stable. And so what I started seeing was that Andrew had started to walk, and now he wasn't. He was pedaling a tricycle, and now he wasn't. He was able to push toys, and now he wasn't. So all these gross motor things. So in my mind, click, 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 hydrocephalus, click, 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 click. Something's going on. What's going on? And I outlined it for my poor pediatrician, and I sent her all the pictures as my corroborating evidence, because I'm thorough, if nothing else. And she called the next morning, is like, Michelle, you need to take him to the ER. And I was like, we already did that. Well, you know what? Let's get him scheduled for an MRI. I can get him in after Labor Day. This was Wednesday. Labor Day was Monday. And I said, you know what? If you think he needs an MRI on Tuesday, he needs an MRI today. Like, I'm just going to go in and take him in, and we'll see what we have to do. So we did. This is a picture of him before we knew, literally the night we found out. Sitting in the emergency room with his big blue eyes and waiting to find out. So 7 hours later, after they've done the CAT scan, they come back, and the doctor comes in, and she says, there's fluid buildup in his brain. And in my mind, I went, check, hydrocephalus, knew it, called it. Okay, now what do we do? I've worked in the medical field for many years. I've treated patients with hydrocephalus. I know that that exists. I didn't know it existed necessarily in the context of anything else. And then this poor emergency room doctor kept talking, like I thought she'd stopped, and she just kept going. She said, and he also has a mass in his brain. And in that moment, my whole world froze. You've heard about medical shock before. I never knew what it was. One of the key indicators of medical shock is the body temperature drops. And in that moment, that whole room dropped 30 degrees. I started chattering. My lips turned blue. I was holding Andrew on my lap. And you guys, you have to know what I said to this woman. I looked at her and I said, you have to leave. You have to leave and come back and tell me something else, because that's not what this is. And she looked at me and she stayed. And then she brought in neuro-oncology, and she brought in neurosurgery. I have a flavor for the dramatic, but the idea that like I was actually talking to a brain surgeon, right? Like that's a joke. It's not brain surgery. There's one now standing there talking to me about what they're going to do to my child tomorrow. And he's just sitting there playing. That's actually from his medical record, the diagnosis that they found in the CT. So we promptly fell down the black hole that is cancer. They took Andrew at around midnight for an MRI, and they put us in this very small, tiny waiting room that was frankly desolate at the time because we were in a hospital in the middle of the night. And in that moment, I had an extreme thought of clarity, and I said to my husband, we have to remember two things. My husband's an engineer, and so whenever I start doing this, he kind of is like, okay, what? What are the two things? I said, we have to remember two things. One, this is the kind of thing that breaks marriages. I cannot lose Andrew and also lose you, no matter what. I said, and second, from this point out, we cannot have any regrets. None. Every choice we make, we have to be sure of and we have to be sound on together, because we can't have any regrets. And so they sent us up to ICU. The night before, we slept in our own bed. Tonight, we're in ICU, which was a little foreign. I'm completely covered in vomit because, mind you, I've been with him all day, and he's vomiting all over me. They give me scrubs. 7 a.m. the next morning, the neurosurgeon comes in, and he sits down with us, and he goes through all the slides. Phenomenal man, Hugh Garton, and walks us through each and every slide and says, here's the tumor, here's where it's at. We're going in for surgical removal now. Okay, we can do this. He says, I need you to know that there's a very real chance he won't come out of this surgery. The tumor is laying on top of his brainstem, is completely entwined in cranial nerves 7 through 10, and there's a large artery coursing through the tumor and encasing it. And I said, just as frankly back to him, I appreciate that, but it's been 12 hours since this diagnosis was told to me. I need you to know I can get okay with it if he dies, but I can't get okay with it today. And so I'm going to need you to pull out. If something goes wrong, I need you to pull out. And he said, okay. So 12 hours later, they brought our boy back, and the neurosurgeon came back. And he said, you know, I have to tell you, in all my years, I've never had a parent in the operating room with me. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Andrew coded during surgery. And I remembered your voice. And I pulled out. There's tumor left in his brain that I wanted to get out, but the risk was too high. And I remembered your voice. And that was one of my #1 lessons through this journey. And that is that my voice matters. My voice for Andrew matters at every point. We waited for Andrew to wake up. It took a while. It took a long while, and finally he did. And then they took the EVD out, so we were actually able to hold him, which was a wonderful moment. And then we waited for the pathology to come back. In that time, it was taking a long time in 2007 for the pathology to come back. As a matter of fact, they sent it to CHOP, to Jackie Beagle. And in that time, our neuro-oncologist sat down with us and mapped out a plan. And her assumption was that it was a medulloblastoma. And her plan was, we'll do a COG protocol, here it is, let's go. She printed off 123 pages for my engineer husband to read every page. And we were ready to go, okay? But that wasn't the diagnosis. The diagnosis was an ATRT. I was told that it was an ATRT when I was by myself at 6 a.m. on rounds by a neurosurgeon I'd never met before, who came into the room while I was half asleep and my husband was sleeping down the hall in a colleague's couch. And she said, so you know it's an ATRT. I went, no. She's like, we know the numbers are really, really small, but somebody has to be the lottery. win the lottery, perhaps it could be you. I actually took those words to heart. For some people, that's very shocking to hear those words. I actually took that as a challenge. I actually took that as, okay, so somebody has beaten it. Somebody somewhere has beaten it. I'm going to need to find them, but somebody somewhere has beaten him. So then when our doctor came back, she said, okay, they had a big team meeting. All three of them came in. We were talking, and she said, okay, it's an ATRT. We'd like to move forward with this COG protocol. And I said, COG protocol? That was for medulloblastoma. And she said, yes. And I said, but this is an ATRT. And she said, yes. Anybody see the flaw in that logic? Yeah. God bless it that I still had an ounce of sanity available to me in that complete horrible moment of desolation. But I said, that doesn't make sense to me. Apples do lead to apples. Apples do not lead to kiwi. Why would you do a protocol that's for a different diagnosis? And I said, you know what? I know doctors. And I know we all have a little bit of ego sometimes. And if this thing has a name, there's somebody somewhere who's studying it. Who is studying ATRT? I want to know who that is, and I want to call them on the telephone. And she's like, I don't think there really is anybody. And I was like, oh, no, there has to be somebody. So we started searching, and we started trying to understand our son's diagnosis. But we checked out of the hospital without a treatment plan, which for those of you who have been diagnosed, that's not all reviewed all that favorably necessarily. But we went home to lick our wounds. We went home to hunker down, lick our wounds, and figure out what we were dealing with. And honestly, on one part, what we were dealing with was this beautiful 17-month-old baby who was now on ridiculously high levels of steroids and was a different kid. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's what steroids did. He looked different, he acted different, he ate nonstop, he cried all the time, and I thought that's what I was going to have for the rest of my life, or his life. At the same time, we read every journal article like it was People magazine. We literally scoured the literature. My husband, a dear friend of mine, and his brother read everything, and they researched trials, and they called every leading pediatric neuro-oncologist in the country and said, hey, what are you guys doing for ATRT now? We sent our scans to every tumor board in the country. Hey, what are you guys doing? What do you think? What's the protocol? Where should we move? And we started getting back a central message, and the central message was there's a clinical trial that just closed that's out of Dana-Farber that looks a little bit better than what we see. ATRT, you truly, and if you don't die in the first year, you die in the second year at that point in time. This protocol, so far, they hadn't hit median survival rates, which basically means kids were living longer than they expected them to. We also then started searching about radiation and trying to understand the effects of radiation, because if we could get this kid to survive, what did we know about the effects of treatment and what was going to happen for him? So we went back to our doctor. They did an MRI, and that stinking tumor thought it belonged there. It had already grown 25% in that 3-week period, and mind you, it wasn't all out to begin with. So we were back to half size at least of that tumor. And our doctor, bless her heart, she had heard my voice, and she had gone and done some research in the meantime, and she came back to us with the exact same protocol. So as we walked into her office and said, we want to do this protocol, she said, I found this protocol and talked to the PI yesterday, let's do this, and it was the same stinking protocol. So again, my voice matters. She heard me. And so that was a very pivotal moment for us. So the next day, we went to the zoo. This idea of what were things we hadn't done, that we should have done, that we meant to do before cancer stole our life, we went to the zoo. And then we came back the next day and we started round 1 of 18 with Andrew. And it was awful. I mean, much like yours, or many of yours, it was hard. There's no way around that. Most of his protocol was spent inpatient, so for 14 months, almost all of our time was spent inpatient in the hospital between 1 week of infusion and then lovely neutropenia hitting and everything else. It was an in and out kind of game. We also moved to Indiana for 6 months to do proton radiation. Proton radiation has a lower exit dose than our standard radiation, and we thought this was important for a 17-month-old brain. But it meant Andrew and I basically packing up and isolating ourselves for those 2 months. And then we kept going. We kept going through our treatment. And we wanted, one of the things that was really important to us was that we find a way to live. Because at that time, I genuinely thought that this little boy was going to die. And if he was going to die, it was critical to me that I had memories of a childhood lived, and that childhood was not defined completely by cancer. So we went to ball games, we went to football games, baseball games, hockey games, anything we could go to. We had parties, we had ridiculous parties, 80 people in my backyard. We ate ice cream every single day. I know the nutritionist is going to talk to me about sugar later. That kid, he ate butter. He ate butter out of the bowl. Every calorie was a good calorie in my world because I was trying to avoid a feeding tube. And we lived. And we found a way to connect with others. We went to our first Ride for Kids through the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation when Andrew was 2 years old and connected with them as part of our family and part of our community. When we had treatment was another thing that was on our schedule. Literally, if you saw our schedule, it was like zoo, labs, infusion number 14, infusion number, party at so-and-so's house. Like it was another thing on our schedule, but it was not our whole schedule. We did things like Andrew brought his lawnmower to the hospital and he mowed the hallways nonstop. We were a force, I have to say. God bless them. They put up with a lot from us. There came this moment in the course of treatment where this really wild and crazy out-of-world thought hit me. And that was, holy crap, this kid might live. It had not occurred to me up to that point that he might live. And then I had this moment of, oh my God, I've been doing everything so that if he died, I wouldn't have regrets. Am I doing the right things in case he lives? Are we making the right choices in case he lives? Are we putting the right things on priority? And as treatment was ending, it was a very scary time for us. Treatment's hard and it's confusing and it's overwhelming and it's scary, but I knew treatment. I knew his roadmap by heart. I knew how to work the coffee pot on the unit. I had a go bag packed. I knew when his counts dropped. I could tell by looking at him. I knew when he needed a transfusion. I knew the exact right time to dose the Benadryl so it wouldn't make him hyper when he was getting a transfusion. I knew that when he had an Omaya injection that he was going to puke every single time no matter what you pre-medded him with, so why bother? I knew the right song to sing to him as he woke up from anesthesia 50+ times to be able to get him to calm down. I knew it. I didn't have a clue how to exist off of treatment. I didn't have any idea what that world would look like without a net. And it truly is, one day you're on treatment and then the next day you're not. And different hospitals, I think, do that in different ways. But for us, it was literally like he ended treatment on October 28th, 2008. And it was like, okay, go back to work, go back to daycare. What do we do? And it's interesting because people around you, when they haven't been there, I think this is the hardest part for them to understand, honestly. Because their first response is, oh my God, you're done, that's great. Congratulations, that's wonderful, that's awesome. And in your heart, yes, you feel that, but that doesn't even begin to capture the fear. Most folks really mean well in this time period, but they kind of have this expectation that you're going to move on. Okay, that was what happened then, and now, well, is he going to go for soccer? And oh, are you going back to work? And so is this good? And you're like, really? I'm not quite there yet. They move on and they forget, and that's totally understandable. But at the end of the day, when the parties are done, the celebrations are done, and everybody leaves, and you close the door to your house, cancer is still there. It doesn't go away. And we are 7 years out, and it still hasn't gone away. It is still in our house each and every day. And so what do you do with that? I think you have to create a new normal. It's a phrase, it's interesting, it's a phrase a lot of times we use with our military families, this idea of a new normal. And I think that's true through any really difficult life experience, whether that's the death of someone close to you, whether that's a divorce, whether that's coming off of cancer treatment or a cancer diagnosis. There is this very strong sense that what was before and what is after is very different. And how do you craft that normal in a way that you own and that is helpful for you and for your family? There's absolute fear. There's always fear, I think, for all of us of a relapse or a recurrence. There's fear of secondary cancer because of the things we've done to save our children. What else might come down the pike? For us, I alternate a lot between vigilance and guilt. So Andrew's been very, 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 very lucky in that his side effect profile is is frankly minimal. We've been really fortunate. But there are lots of things that I could be doing. He could be going to physical therapy. He could be going to occupational therapy. He could be doing this. He could be doing this. And so I alternate between doing all those things and then feeling guilty because I'm not. And I alternate between being like on top of every single teacher and every single person in his world and then not. And so there's this guilt of like, could I be doing more? Should I be doing more? What else should I be doing? What else should I be anticipating? I think there's also this very real grief that folks don't talk about. We've had in our ATRT community, the number of families that we have lost has been tremendous. And I'm sure that's the same for many others of you. It has been tremendous. And so first and foremost, you have survivor's guilt in some ways, but then you have this other piece of, it almost mitigates then our opportunity to feel grief over what might have been or what could have been. With Andrew doing well, I wonder, what would he have been without cancer and without treatment? Where would he have gone? I think there's this thing for many of us when we're having babies and when we have that baby in our belly, you have all these hopes and dreams and you think, I want them to be perfect and I want them to be popular and I want them to be pretty and fast and all these things. And you get cancer and you just want them to live. Please just live. And then they survive and now you just want them to blend in. You just want them to be as good as everybody else and not stand out for the things that are different. And there's a grief in that I think is hard for others to recognize. We try very hard in our new normal to keep the lessons that we've lived as part of our daily life. It's hard, but we try really hard. We also have a real appreciation for what we've been through and recognize the gift we've been given. And to that end, we celebrate, and we celebrate a lot. We've kind of got a really bad rap for that with our friend group of being party central. Our new normal included having more kids. I don't know what the heck I was thinking. Like, whose idea this was, I don't even know. It's funny, I said that recently at the breakfast table the other day to Andrew. I said, oh my God, whose idea was this to have more? And he's like, it was yours, Mom, because you thought you were going to die and you didn't want to have none. And I was like, okay. Oh my God. He gets, and I was like, thanks. Point well taken, eat your cereal. So we went ahead and had two more, Benjamin and Aaron, and it has been tremendously fun and busy and rambunctious. We also celebrate, and when I say we celebrate, we have 5 people in our family. We celebrate the last night of your birthday, so goodbye to 4, goodbye to 37, or goodbye to whatever. And then, of course, we celebrate the next day, too. And we celebrate every holiday in between. We have an annual party at our house. This year we had all of Andrew's, at the time, 2nd grade classroom over with a big bouncer and a water hose. And, 7-year-olds with a big inflatable bouncer and a water hose is quite a celebration. We also go to every single carnival within a 30-mile radius of our home in Michigan, which I got to tell you is a lot. We spend a lot of times in the summer at carnivals. And we also have just fun. So for Andrew's 8th birthday party, he invited 20 kids to my 1,500-square-foot home for a Nerf gun party, where we had teams and stations and color-coded teams. So we try to really keep that as part of our life and as part of our living. And we have family pictures done every single year. It's funny how something so little can be part of what you change, but it's so easy for things to slip. We have a standing date every October because I want that as part of our record. I want that as part of our world. I think one of the things that I've learned is that the story you tell matters. The words that you say to yourself, the words that you say to others, the words that you say to your children, and the way you say them, they matter. And they matter tremendously, both for you and how you are doing. They matter for how your family's doing, and they matter for how others perceive you. For us, I spent a lot of time thinking about what's the story I tell myself about this? What do I tell myself? How do I make meaning of this? How do I make sense of this? And I think each and every person has to do this differently. The way I do it is not at all the way someone else would do it. So in fact, I don't use the word survivor. You haven't heard me use that word. You won't hear me use that word. I say Andrew had cancer. It's just part of me and part of what makes sense in my language. A lot of people will look at him with ATRT and they'll go, oh my God, it's a miracle. That doesn't resonate for me. I say we're lucky. We were really lucky because I know many families who weren't. I also don't ever say the word remission. because Andrew has a genetic mutation that puts him at very high risk for relapse. And so the difference between us being right here and going down the foxhole again is a very, very fine line and one single test. Okay. I think it's important what the story is that you tell others. We're in this interesting position, as I imagine some of you are who are further out, of telling people who didn't know you when. And what do you say? Do you, hi, guess what? Do you introduce yourself like that? Do you introduce your kid like that? Andrew was 2 and 3 whenever he went through treatment. We didn't know any of the kids in his school when that happened. We didn't know any of them. But yet we have to share some of that, at least with his teachers, so that they can understand the helps that he might need and to both hold him accountable, but also give him some room. We've also spent a lot of time on the story that Andrew tells. I consider it one of my greatest honors and obligations as a mom to be able to help Andrew shape his story, to shape his story and to learn to tell his story from a place of strength and a place of resilience, so that this becomes something that happened to him and is a part of him, but it doesn't define him. It was important, too, when you think about this happening to someone as a young child, because kids have questions about their childhood, right? As they get up, what was I like when this happened? Like, as the twins were growing up, Andrew would say, well, what was I like when I was 3? Or did we do this when I was 2? And it was very interesting to stop yourself, right? Because usually when somebody says, oh, what was that like? You're like, oh, my God, it was horrible. But you can't just, that can't be there. That's because it wasn't all horrible. There were moments and there were things in that were glorious and that were wonderful. And so trying to find a way to shift your light to focus on some of those has been something we've actively tried to do, and I think it's made a difference for us. We've also been very invested in community. We have gone to the Ride for Kids in Michigan since 2008. They opened their arms to this beautiful little bald baby and let him touch their motorcycles when he was little. And they still do it with my other 2, which is crazy on their part. But they have welcomed us into their home, and they have really connected us. We consider it part of our responsibility to go to them and to share our story, because their work matters. Through the Ride for Kids, they raise a tremendous amount of money for the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation and for research. And at the core of this, my belief is that research matters, that medicine can move very quickly, and that speed can change the difference between living and dying for our children. And so we strongly support these kinds of efforts and are happy to share our story in support of that. So I think we had a lot of lessons during our time, as I'm sure each of you have too, and maybe some of them are similar, and maybe there's some other many wonderful ones that I've yet to learn. We try to live our life now with those lessons as our foundation. So we try to live with no regrets, which means I say yes to a lot of things that are fun, and I say no to a lot of things that are hassles or irritations. We do not overschedule ourselves with things that are perfunctory. We try to invest our time and our spirit in the place that matters the most, and that's with each other. I am bent on wheels about being informed and having knowledge. I know a lot about if he relapses, what are the treatments right now, but I also am very informed about him. I have a neuropsych evaluation done on him every single year so that I just know where he's at cognitively, because the likelihood that there's going to be things fall off the rails just given what he's endured is really high, and I want to know it. I use my voice a lot. I use my voice with our medical team. I use my voice with our teaching team. I use my voice with our kids, but I'm always checking what's that voice saying, and is it coming from a place of protecting and supporting Andrew and moving things forward for him in the best way. And then we try to live. There was a friend who came to me towards the end of our treatment who said, I wish that I could get where you are without having to go through what you've gone through. And she meant it as a compliment. And I thought about that, and I thought about that in coming to talk to you, and the truth of the matter is you can't. That we're in a club together, all of us. We didn't choose this club, we didn't choose this path, but we're in it and we're in it together. My hope is that I've learned something from being in this club and being on this path, and that I'm a better person for it, and that I can help my son be a better person for it as well. And I have to say that I'm honored to be in this club, and I'm honored to be on this path traveling with each of you. Thank you.